You see the fog gather thickly against the mullioned windows of Catamol House, pressing its pale face against the glass like some conspirator eager for admittance. The year is 1937, and this rambling estate in Surrey has the smell of neglect about it. Damp corridors, dust on the banisters, and lamps that flicker with the restless draught. Yet it is in the study, a long panelled chamber with a heavy oak door, that the impossible has taken place. Sir Alistair Catamol, barrister turned eccentric antiquarian, lies slumped across his writing table. His spectacles are still perched on his nose, the pale light of a guttering candle throwing grotesque shadows across his features. A wineglass sits at his elbow, half drained, with a faint smear of white sediment clinging to the bottom. The key to the room dangled absurdly from the inside lock. No window has been touched. Their catches remain fastened, the leaded panes streaked with condensation. Every corner tells you the same chilling truth. No one could have entered or left. Chief Superintendent Hadley, broad-shouldered and grave, surveys the chamber with his usual dispassionate calm. You hear him murmur, "Bolts on the door." Windows latched, no second key. The doctor says poison, though how in heaven's name it was introduced. His voice trails away. Patrick Butler, KC, flamboyant in evening dress despite the lateness of the hour, paces like a caged animal. "Dash it, Hadley! You've a stage illusion here. One of those locked room puzzles magicians devise to mock the witless. Poison in a sealed room, ha! The newspapers will have a field day. And when they do, I'll wager the blame will fall neatly on that household of hangers-on. The housekeeper, the sullen nephew, or, what's her name? The companion nurse." Butler's voice rises, full of courtroom thunder, but the silence of the room swallows it whole. The only reply is the drip of rain against the stone sill. Then, a detail. You notice Sir Alistair's hands stretched out, fingers splayed toward a small iron object resting on the blotter. It is a key, ornate, curiously hollow along the shaft, as though designed for some trick mechanism. The sight of it prickles your skin. Hadley stoops, his brow furrowed. Odd-looking thing, that. Yet every cupboard and cabinet stands open, no hidden lockboxes, no sign of struggle. He exchanges a glance with Butler. It's the key itself that bothers me. If the poison came by glass, how did he drink it unwittingly? And why lock himself in? The servants mutter outside the study door, their whispers carrying like rustling paper. You catch fragments. He had enemies. The will. A quarrel at the club. Each repetition shifts the tale, twisting fact into rumour. Already, the impossible death is breeding its own mythology. At that moment, a new sound intrudes. The steady tap-tap of a cane upon stone flags in the hall. Heavy, deliberate steps approach, and with them a gust of damp air as the door creaks open. In waddles, Doctor. Gideon Fell, immense of girth, wrapped in a cape that smells faintly of beer and tobacco. His shovel hat droops with rain, and behind his spectacles, his eyes glimmer with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Good evening, gentlemen," Fell booms, as though addressing a lecture hall. "I hear you've contrived to discover a corpse in circumstances quite calculated to annoy me. Poison in a locked room, eh?" He chuckles, dropping heavily into a chair that groans in protest. Well, let's not go melodramatic. The devil of these affairs always lies in the domestic detail. A candle, a curtain, a glass placed to the left rather than the right. Butler spreads his arms theatrically. "Fell, you arrive like the prompter at a pantomime. Explain it then. A man dead of poison, alone in a room barred from the inside, with only that curious toy key as his companion. By what agency was he murdered?" Fell wheezes a laugh, his chins quivering. "My dear Butler, explanations are for later. For now, let us observe what others overlook. You, Hadley, see that candle stub? And there, the bell pull, a faint smear of, well, never mind." He breaks off, reaching for his notebook, with hands that tremble slightly but never falter. The silence deepens. You sense the atmosphere shift, as though the shadows themselves are listening. And then, as the wind rattles the shutters, Fell leans forward, peering at the hollow key upon the desk. His joviality fades. His voice drops to a rumble that makes you shiver. "Gentlemen," he says, "you are looking at the wrong death." The key tells us so. What it unlocks, what it means, is something quite different. The candle gutters violently, throwing the room into momentary darkness. You hear Butler draw in his breath sharply, as though realizing for the first time that Sir Alistair Cattermole may not have been the only victim in the room. The mutter of voices spreads like smoke through the drafty corridors of Cattermole House, rising and falling in anxious bursts. Servants huddle in corners, each retelling of the scene in the study acquiring fresh exaggerations. By the time you step back into the hall, Sir Alistair's body has already become the centre of 3 different tales. One insists he was struck down by a curse from some antique relic. Another swears the hollow key itself contained a needle of poison, and a third whispers of a spectral visitor. Footprints in the fog that stopped short outside the study door. Every repetition twists the truth until what was already impossible grows more grotesque still. Hadley, stone-faced, quiets them with a raised hand. "There will be time for statements," he says. "For now, you will hold your tongues. The more you embroider, the harder it will be to untangle fact from fancy." Yet even as he speaks, you hear another servant mutter, "He was afraid, sir, very afraid these last days." He said he was followed when he walked to the club. Patrick Butler leans on the stair rail, cigarette flashing in the gloom, his voice a deliberate provocation. "They'll all swear differently by morning, Hadley. You'll have a dozen versions in print before breakfast, each more lurid than the last. And who knows, perhaps the wildest of them will turn out true. I've defended stranger tales." His words, though spoken with bravado, carry the unmistakable note of unease. Fell, planted, heavily in a hall chair like some medieval effigy, regards the hubbub with amused detachment. His cane rests across his knees, and behind his spectacles, his eyes twinkle like a lantern. "The contagion of gossip," he murmurs, "is often more illuminating than the facts. Watch the details. They contradict. When one swears he heard the master ring for the housekeeper after 11, and another insists she was already in bed before the clock struck. Then you find the seam in the fabric. Gentlemen, it is in contradiction that truth begins." The first contradiction surfaces almost at once. Mrs. Greeley, the stout housekeeper, insists she saw Sir Alistair extinguish his lamp just before midnight. Yet young Edward Cattermole, the sharp-faced nephew, declares he heard his uncle's tread in the study long after, the floorboards creaking as though under the weight of a pacing man. Both cling to their stories, indignant, each convinced of accuracy. Hadley jots a note, his frown deepening. Both cannot be right. Which of them lies, or errs? He casts a glance toward Fell, but Fell only chuckles, producing a pipe from the recesses of his coat. "Patience, Superintendent. Time is the most slippery of witnesses. One may be right in what was done, the other in when. The apparent quarrel may prove only a trick of perception." Butler, restless, seizes upon the hollow key, which Hadley has placed inside a handkerchief. He holds it up to the light of the sputtering sconces, his voice ringing theatrically. "Here is our villain, gentlemen, an instrument so contrived that it mocks the law itself. Hollow, as though for powder or gas. Can we not assume the wretch slipped this device to Sir Alistair, who, in fiddling with it, doomed himself?" Hadley growls. "You forget, Butler, the room was locked from within. Who would hand him such a trinket unseen?" "Bah! A servant, a caller, anyone," Butler replies, exhaling smoke like a barrister dismissing a weak witness. The law of evidence demands not wizardry, but opportunity. Fell's eyes glitter, and he interrupts with genial firmness. Theatrical, yes, but premature. That key, hollow though it may be, does not deliver death in itself, at least, not directly. He leans forward, lowering his voice so that the servants nearby crane their necks to catch it. Note, gentlemen, the curious coincidence. The only key in the door, yet another key upon the desk, one to keep intruders out, and one, perhaps, to invite death in. A silence follows, broken only by the faint crackle of the lamps. The servants exchange glances, their fears renewed. As the night lengthens, statements are gathered. The nurse, Miss Elspeth Arden, pale and tight-lipped, claims Sir Alistair had been irritable all week, drinking more than usual, muttering of a quarrel at the club. Edward Cattermole, the nephew, admits to pressing his uncle about an inheritance, though he swears their dispute ended peacefully. Mrs. Greeley insists she heard the bell pull faintly stir sometime after 11, though when she answered, no summons came. Hadley notes it all grimly, then beckons Butler and Fell aside. Every account contradicts another. It will take weeks to separate truth from embroidery. Butler, flicking ash with a flourish, replies, or one good cross-examination, my dear Hadley. Give me a witness stand and I'll untangle their tongues in an hour. Not yet, Fell interrupts, his voice warm but edged. Cross-examinations will come. For now, listen to the rhythm of their lies. There are always polite lies in such households. Falsehoods meant not to conceal crime, but to spare pride. The trick lies in knowing which of them masks something darker. You watch as Fell rises ponderously, cane tapping against the stone. He studies the study door once more, his hand brushing the cold brass handle. Tell me, Hadley, was it you who locked this room after the discovery? Aye, Hadley replies. I turned the key myself, with witnesses present. Fell nods, satisfied. Then, no tampering since. Good. Remember that, gentlemen. The room stands now as it did when death visited it. Outside, fog pushes closer to the windows, muffling the night. The whispers die away, leaving only the throb of the grandfather clock in the hall. You feel the weight of silence, thick and oppressive. Then, from somewhere beyond the servants' quarters, comes a sudden, high-pitched cry. A maid stumbles forward, white-faced, clutching a scrap of paper. Sir Alistair, he wrote something. She thrusts it out, trembling. Butler seizes the paper, smoothing it with impatient fingers. The writing, scrawled in a faltering hand, reads, "The key is not the key. It is the hollow that kills." Words hang in the air like a sentence pronounced. Fell's chuckle dies, and behind his spectacles, his eyes flash wide open, as though he has just recognized the shape of a second, hidden crime crouching in the shadows of the first. The paper trembles in Butler's hand, the words scrawled in Sir Alistair's faltering script, glaring up like an accusation. The key is not the key. It is the hollow that kills. For a moment, no one speaks, as though the sentence itself has frozen the breath from every throat. The maid stifles a sob, Hadley mutters for quiet, and Butler theatrically declares, "Gentlemen, we have here the dead man's dying declaration. A riddle, yes, but a riddle in law is still testimony." Fell lumber forward with surprising speed, cane clattering against the tiles. He peers at the note, lips pursed, eyes narrowing until the genial fog of his expression sharpens into something surgical. "Ink fresh," he murmurs, "written tonight, though not in the last moment. See here, the hesitation in the line, the blot from a weary hand. Our poor fellow jotted this perhaps an hour before death, when the dread was already upon him." Hadley takes the note carefully, folding it into an envelope. "We'll have the handwriting verified, but I'll not deny it looks authentic. A clue or a contrivance, Dr. Fell? That's for us to decide later. As the household disperses, Fell insists on returning to the study, this time with fewer onlookers. You follow him, Butler, and Hadley, into the dim chamber, where the candle still burns low, throwing fitful shadows over Sir Alistair's slumped form. The silence presses again, broken only by Fell's wheezing breath as he lowers himself beside the desk. He lets others speak first. Butler paces, gesturing grandly at the body and the glass. Mark you the wineglass position, to the left hand, though Sir Alistair was no southpaw. Why? Did someone place it there after death? Or was he himself compelled to use the wrong hand? Hadley, in a court, I'd hammer such a point until the jury nodded in unison. Hadley, weary but attentive, observes the window latch. Secure, no tampering. Yet look, condensation on the inside, undisturbed, as though no breath has clouded it since early evening. Meaning he kept this room shut tight for hours. Why? A man grows stifled, opens a window, unless he feared someone outside. Fell listens, puffing faintly on his pipe, though he does not light it. His gaze roves, the candle stub guttering unevenly, the bell pull with a faint smear like a thumbprint in dust, and the hollow key glimmering dully in the lamplight. His hand hovers over it, but does not touch. The odd prop, he mutters. Always some domestic trifle. A bell that smudges, a key that is not a key, and a glass placed against habit. There lies our trick. Butler leans close, impatient. Then why not say it plainly? You see something, Fell. Out with it. But Fell only chuckles, deep and wheezy. My dear fellow, one mustn't spoil the play in the first act. Let us gather every line before we pronounce the plot. Hadley turns practical. He checks the door again. The key is still inside the lock, protruding awkwardly. One key in the lock, one key on the desk, and no sign of a duplicate. Unless you think, Fell, that hollow ornament fits more than one purpose. Fell glances up sharply. That, Superintendent, is the very question. What does it unlock, if indeed it unlocks anything at all? Perhaps it is not a key to a lock, but to a device. Or perhaps... He breaks off, leaving the air heavy with suggestion. From beyond the room, a clock tolls the quarter hour, reminding you that the night creeps toward dawn. The servants have withdrawn to uneasy quarters, but their fear lingers like smoke. In the flickering candlelight, Sir Alistair's features seem to shift, as though mocking your attempts to fix them into certainty. Fell rises, puffing and wheezing, to examine the shelves along the wall. See here, gentlemen. Antiquarian volumes, most untouched for years, yet this one, on Stage Conjuring, shows signs of recent handling. Our victim had an interest in trickery, illusion, mechanism, deception. Did he study them out of amusement, or because he feared they were used against him? Butler snorts. A lawyer dabbling in conjuring tricks, all the better for him to be hoisted by his own studies. Perhaps he experimented with a poison illusion and bungled the act. Fell fixes him with a twinkle. That would be convenient. Yet I fear our victim was not merely dabbling. He was anticipating it. Hadley interrupts, practical as ever. Enough speculation. The doctor's report will tell us whether the poison came by mouth or otherwise. Until then, we work with facts. Fact, Sir Alistair is dead in a locked study. Fact, a glass with sediment. Fact, a note with a cryptic warning. Everything else must wait. Fell sank again into the armchair, his bulk settling like an anchor. He steeples his fingers. Very well, but I beg to note another fact. The bell pull was touched. Someone attempted to summon aid, or to make it seem so, and the smear upon it tells us which. Before Hadley can press him further, the study door rattles with a knock. Mrs. Greeley, red-eyed, peers in. Begging pardon, sir, There's a gentleman from the Gazette already at the gate. News spreads fast. Butler swears softly. By morning, it will be a carnival. Mystery of the hollow key. They'll print drawings of skeletons dancing on the hearthrug. Hadley waves her away firmly, but Fell chuckles again, voice heavy with irony. Let them chatter. Each retelling sharpens the impossibility. And impossibility, gentlemen, is a stage trick. Once we see the wires and mirrors, the ghost dissolves. He hauls himself to his feet, casting one last glance at the corpse. Come, enough for tonight. But remember this. Sir Alistair warned us. The hollow that kills. What did he mean? Not poison in the wineglass alone. That is too simple, too bald. He meant something subtler. Death lies not in what we see, but in what we do not. The candle gutters out at that instant, plunging the chamber into darkness. In the black silence, Butler mutters an oath. Hadley gropes for matches, and for one dreadful heartbeat, you sense a presence moving in the dark beside you. Then light flares again, as Hadley strikes a flame, but the room is unchanged. Save that the hollow key upon the desk has shifted, lying now at a slightly different angle, as though nudged by an unseen hand. You watch Fell's face tighten, his jovial mask slipping as he stares at the shifted key, and you realize for the first time that even he is not entirely certain how close the killer still is. You stand in the chill drawing room just after dawn, when fog still pours at the windows and the coal grates sulk. A constable has been posted at the study. The household gathers here instead, shabby, with a night's vigil. Hadley clears his throat, the leather of his notebook creaking, and sets out what any sober policeman must. We have a locked room, a glass with residue, and a note apparently written by the deceased. We have no marks of violence, no sign of entry or exit. In the absence of contradiction, the simplest hypothesis is suicide by poison. He looks to the servants like a magistrate at the dock. Sir Alistair, fearful and unwell, may have taken a dose and locked himself in to die without disturbance. Butler raises his hands with courtroom splendour. Oh, admirable! Neat as a brief tied-in blue tape. The Times will adore it. Unfortunately, Superintendent, it is wrong. If a man chooses to die discreetly, he does not compose a riddle about keys and hollows, ring his bell like a drowning man, and then place his glass in the wrong hand. Hadley's jaw sets. Or he does every one of those things because his nerve failed at the last, or because he wished to stage a message. Don't fence me with rhetoric, Butler. I've seen quieter suicides and noisier ones. Fell sits grandly in an armchair whose arms wheeze in protest, watching smoke from the fresh-laid fire advance and retreat like scouts. Ah, the neat theory, he says almost tenderly. It comes early to every good case, the way breakfast comes to a hotel tray. Too soon and too orderly. Let's hear it in full, Hadley, and then let's bruise it. Hadley, unruffled, continues. Sir Alistair had a long-standing bottle of chloral in his medicine chest, used for irregular sleep. The nurse confirms it. A man versed in trickery could well have contrived a dramatic token, the hollow key to make a riddle of an ordinary act. The locked door is easily explained. Dread makes men bar themselves. The bell pull smear, a last instant of panic, the white sediment, an undissolved tablet in wine. Fools do worse. Which leaves us, Hadley concludes, with a study sealed from within and an unhappy man alone in it. Until I get a pathologist's word that something exotic has meddled with the body, I'm bound to hold suicide foremost. You feel Butler coil like a spring. Bound. Then let me lose you. He pivots, with that theatrical swivel that in court signals the moment a witness is trapped. Mrs. Greeley, if you please. The housekeeper waddles forward, smoothing her apron with fingers gone red and chapped. I don't see why. You will indulge me, Butler says silkily. We are all friends here, yes, and we seek only to spare you the mortification of being shown mistaken. He smiles. It glints. You told the superintendent you saw Sir Alistair extinguish his lamp a little before midnight. I did, sir. You told him also you retired at 11:30 sharp, as is your habit. I did, sir. So you observed a lamp in a room whose door was closed, at a time when you were already asleep. Admirable powers of vision. He lets the sarcasm float, then snaps. Or else you looked under the door and saw darkness and chose to call that an extinguished lamp. Because you did not wish to admit you were still in the corridor after your proper hour. Which is it? Her mouth opens and closes. I went to the pantry, she blurts. For the tea things. The char. She'd left them. I passed the exam. There was a line of light under the door a few minutes before 11. Later, there wasn't. That's what I meant. Butler pounces. Later when? She flounders. Near midnight, sir. Near midnight is a clock with a hoarse voice, Butler says. Give me minutes. 10, 20, 30. Her eyes flicker to the nephew. I can't say. You won't, Butler corrects, smooth as cream. Because to fix the time would fix you, and perhaps also Mr. Edward Catamole. You see? The polite lie. You wish to spare his late prowling. Edward flushes. This is impertinent. It is relevant, Butler says, turning on him. You told us you heard your uncle pacing in the study well after midnight. I did. And you were in the corridor then? In my room with the door ajar. Doing what? Smoking. Smoking what? Butler's voice is kindly poisonous. Cigarettes. Your brand is Turkish. They have a smell like old tea in the sea. Mrs. Greeley. He doesn't look at her. Did you smell anything like that when you fetched your tea things at your improper hour? A miserable whisper. Yes. Butler spreads his hands. You see, Superintendent, they scramble their times to shield each other's foibles. Our neat theory has been laid out on a tidy tablecloth, but the crumbs beneath tell the older story. There was movement in the corridor around midnight. Who did the pacing? And if Sir Alistair paced, why did Mrs. Greeley later see darkness under the door? We have inconsistency, which is the enemy of suicide neatly done. Hadley's pen has paused. Or a drunk nerd friend. Butler. I grant you the household sans shift, but that does not conjure a murderer through a bolted door. He turns to Miss Arden, the nurse. You gave Sir Alistair his sleeping draught when? 10:15, she says, steady as glass. Half dose, as he requested. He disliked the stuff. It muddled him. Did you pour it? I measured it in the spoon, and he washed it down with wine. From the decanter in the study? Yes. Butler tilts his head. Half dose at 10:15. Wine after. Did he complain about the taste? He grimaced, she admits, and said, chalk and ashes. He often said so. Fell, who has seemed to drowse, opens one eye. Chalk and ashes. He repeats softly. How very human of him. Butler wheels. Miss Arden, indulge a barrister's whim. When you left him, was the glass on the right-hand side of the blotter or the left? She frowns. The right. And we found it on the left. Superintendent, will you permit a little demonstration? He does not wait. He drags a chair to the centre of the carpet as though it were a witness box. Miss Arden, kindly sit. Imagine yourself at the writing table. Pour a spoonful, hand it, and watch him drink. Now, he says chalk and ashes. What do you do? I wipe the spoon. With what? A handkerchief. Hi. Which you took from where? From the blotter. On which side? Right. Butler's smile becomes feline. And you replace the handkerchief where? I back on the blotter. On which side? She hesitates. Right. So the right-hand side bore the handkerchief and the used spoon and the wine glass he first lifted. Butler turns, voice ringing. But later, the glass sits on the left and shows white sediment. Someone, after Miss Arden's visit, moved it. The neat theory of suicide says no one could. The messy truth of households says someone did. Miss Arden's face has not altered, but there is a tightness at her mouth. If anyone moved it, it was Sir Alistair. He often shuffled his papers. He would slide things left when he grew impatient. Hadley intervenes, practically. Enough theatrics. Butler, you've shown not murder, but muddle. People move glasses. Lamps are doused. Bells are pulled. The locked door stands. Fell chuckles and lever himself up, cane tapping. Hadley is right, my flamboyant friend. The locked door does stand, and the room still whispers suicide if you listen lazily. But do not listen lazily. There is one thread your neat theory cannot swallow. His eyes go to the bell pull. When panic seizes a man who has poisoned himself, he tugs for help like a drowning sailor. He does not take time to wipe his thumb on a dusty braid and leave a neat grey smear. Someone touched that bell with deliberation, not frenzy. But if someone touched it, Hadley says, they were in the room. That is the delightful paradox, Fell murmurs. You feel the room tighten as Butler senses a scent of blood. Miss Arden, another little point. You keep Sir Alistair's medicines. In the cabinet by the door. And the key. In my pocket. Always. Except when Sir Alistair took it to check his supplies. When was that last? Yesterday afternoon. Did he return it? Yes. Fell's eyes are twinkling again. The key again. Keys breed like rabbits in this house. Hadley snaps his notebook shut. My position stands until contradicted by a fact beyond these niceties. Suicide remains the working hypothesis. We will send the glass to be examined and the note to be verified. A draft snakes across your ankles just then. A cold finger from nowhere. The windows are latched, the door is shut and the fire is low, yet the candle by the sideboard shivers, its flame drawing toward the wainscot as though a breath slid from inside the wall. Fell turns his head sharply, nostrils flaring. Do you feel that? You do, and with it, something else, a faint, irregular tick-tick behind the panelling, like a tired clock that cannot quite keep time. The irregular ticking continues faintly behind the panelling, an almost apologetic sound, as though the house itself were clearing its throat. Butler stalks across the drawing room and presses his ear to the wainscot. A mouse with hobnail boots, he mutters, or else a devil with bad timekeeping. Hadley, you have poltergeists in Surrey. Hadley scowls, tugging at the candle holder near the sideboard. Old houses creak, pipes knock. Don't make music out of wind in the chimney. He pushes against the panelling but finds nothing loose. Still, the draught that had bent the candle persists, curling about ankles like smoke without fire. Fell sits immovable, spectacles glinting. He raises his cane and gestures at the candle. Observe the flame direction, gentlemen. Not toward the window, but toward the wall. A trifling matter, and yet it whispers. Whispering trifles make a chorus louder than thunder. Butler turns sharply. By Jove, Fell, you're at it again. What does the whisper say? Fell wheezes a chuckle. It says someone tampered with air where air ought not to move. Perhaps nothing more than a gap in the boards. But if so, why here, in this room, on the night of death? Hadley is unwilling to indulge riddles further. He closes his notebook with a snap. Enough of drafts and candle tricks. The body is to be moved within the hour. My men will comb the grounds. There's no more ringing from the walls. Yet even as he speaks, you feel the weight of contradiction hang heavier. Suicide is neat, but the house resists neatness. Every trivial detail, glass on the wrong side, Bell pull with its smudge, candle leaning toward the wall, clutters the picture. Butler senses the mood and pounces. He circles back to the hollow key lying in Hadley's envelope. There it sits, the centerpiece, ignored by our superintendent's tidy theory, a trinket too odd to be innocent. Tell me, Hadley, would a man who wishes to die puzzle us with that bauble? Or does he leave us instead a plain farewell? And yet we have a warning note and a hollow toy. Suicide or not, there's performance in it. Miss Arden, watching quietly from her chair, speaks up with a calmness too measured. Sir Alistair often carried that key. He said it belonged to a piece of furniture long gone. A keepsake. A hollow nothing if you ask me. Fell swings his head towards her, spectacles catching firelight. A hollow nothing, Miss Arden. A phrase worth underlining. Even keepsakes can betray the hand that cherishes them. And I would ask, if it unlocks nothing here, why keep it on his blotter and not in a drawer? Why so near his wineglass, his bell pull, his final scrawl? The nurse reddens but holds her ground. Because he was a fussy old man, Doctor. He left odd things everywhere. Butler makes a show of bowing. And thus we have our puzzle explained away by domestic fussiness. Curtains, spoons, glasses, all trifles. Until, Superintendent, one trifling thing collapses your entire neat theory. Hadley growls, "Which?" Butler points like an actor at the centre stage. The smear on the bell pull. A man dying in panic leaves sweat, not deliberate ash. That was no flailing cry for help. It was a performance. Fell raises a great hand. Not so fast, Butler. You've struck the gong too soon. The smear, yes, is deliberate. But whether it proves intrusion or misdirection, I do not yet say. Still, mark the word, deliberate. That is the one thing suicide is not. The room grows still. Outside, the fog presses like a damp cloth against the windows. The household exchange looks less like grief than of calculation, as if each considers what corner of their life Sir Alistair's death may expose. Then the second contradiction arrives. Constable Briggs steps in, cap in hand. "Beg pardon, sir. We've searched the cabinet of medicines. The bottle of chloral is nearly full. Only 2 doses are missing in months. The nurse says she gave him one last night. A half dose. Leaves near a whole bottle yet." Hadley frowns. Then how do we explain the residue in the glass? Briggs shrugs. "No tablet missing from any other bottle, sir. And yet, this was lying in the drawer." He produces a stopper, plain glass, faintly smudged. "Doesn't match the bottle of chloral, doesn't match anything." A ripple passes through the company. Butler seizes it instantly. "A swapped stopper, gentlemen. There is our petty anomaly. Some hands exchanged it, leaving it dusty and careless. A trifle, yes, but trifles make trials." Fell rises ponderously, taking the stopper with a groan of effort. He holds it to the light, eyes narrowed. "Not from chloral, indeed. From a decanter, I'd wager. Wine or spirits, and its lip bears a white crust, faint as chalk." He sniffs, nods once, and returns it. There you have it, a trivial anomaly that sings. If Sir Alistair was poisoned, it was not through his draught alone, but by tampered wine. Hadley exhales slowly, as though conceding the smallest ground. That is possible. And yet the room remained locked. The door was bolted. The windows are secure. Fell chuckles again, the sound rolling like thunder muffled in the distance. "Always the locked door, Hadley. But remember, impossibility is a stage curtain. Pull it, and the ordinary steps out grinning." Butler looks from Fell to the servants, sensing opportunity for drama. "Very well, Superintendent. Shall I tell you what this means in a court? It means your neat theory of suicide has collapsed under its own trifles. You must charge someone, or admit the law itself is mocked." Hadley bristles, but before he can reply, another sound cuts the air, a single sharp clang from the study, as though the bell pull within had been yanked by an unseen hand. Every face turns white. Constable Briggs bolts back toward the door, but when it is flung wide, the room is empty, the body still slumped, and the key still in its envelope. Only the bellrope sways faintly, and in the silence that follows, you hear again the irregular tick-tick behind the wall. Fell lowers himself into his chair, pipe clutched between fat fingers. His jovial mask has slipped once more. "Gentlemen," he says quietly, "we are dealing not with despair, but with design. The house itself is helping the murderer." The swaying of the bell rope does not cease, but keeps moving, as though an invisible hand still clutched it from within the wall. The rope's slow swaying finally stills, though the image of it hangs in everyone's mind like the echo of a tolling bell. No one speaks at first. The silence is too thick, and the notion of something unseen pulling in that locked room is too dreadful to put into words. Butler recovers first, with a bravado too sharp not to conceal nerves. "There, Hadley, your suicide tugs the bell after death. Unless you propose to summon ghosts into the witness box, the law will not accommodate you." Hadley's eyes flash, but his tone stays even. It's trickery. Has to be. Someone slipped back inside when the constable's watch shifted. He rounds on Briggs. "Who passed the door?" "No one, sir," Briggs insists, pale as chalk. "I swear it. I stood right outside, not a footstep near." Fell pushes himself up with a wheeze, moving with ponderous deliberation toward the study. He stares at the still rope, eyes glittering behind his spectacles. A trick, yes, but it's the kind of trick that tells you much about the hand behind it. Misdirection, stage-managed fear. Our killer is not content with one impossibility. He must double it to secure the illusion. Butler lets out a low whistle. That, my dear Fell, is almost artistry. The man contrives not one locked room puzzle, but repeats the effect before witnesses. He dares us to solve it. Hadley snaps. "Enough theatre. We'll post men at every door and window. Whoever plays these games will find them ended." Yet even he sounds less certain than before, as though the steady tick-tick behind the wall gnaws at his confidence. By morning, the fog has thinned, and Catamole House looks almost ordinary in the grey daylight. But its halls feel different, restless, as if every corridor held its breath. Fell, Butler and Hadley set about widening the field of inquiry. The servants are summoned again, and with them others who had known Sir Alistair. More faces, more voices, more polite lies waiting to be disentangled. The first new figure arrives by motor car, stepping briskly into the hall with the air of a man half summoned, half curious. He is Dr. Hubert Latham, a chemist from the village, spectacles gleaming and hair disordered by the wind. "I came," he announces, "because I heard talk in the street already. They say Sir Alistair's death is unnatural. If poison is suspected, perhaps my knowledge may be of service. He purchased supplies from my shop." His words fall neat and tidy, but his eyes wander too quickly over the gathered company, measuring, recalling. Butler seizes on him with relish. "Then perhaps you, sir, can tell us how a hollow key could be used to kill a man?" The chemist startles. "A key? Hollow?" His brow furrows. "If hollow along the shaft, it could conceal powder, snuff, salts, or something more harmful. A clever way to deliver a dose unnoticed." His words hang, and you see Miss Arden stiffen slightly, though she says nothing. Hadley questions him with a quiet method. "When was the last time Sir Alistair purchased from you?" 3 weeks ago. He wanted wine salts for digestion and—" the chemist hesitates. "And he inquired after certain compounds used in theatrical effects. Coloured flames, smoke powders. He asked if any could be harmless for display. I assumed it was part of his antiquarian amusements." Fell lets out a rumbling chuckle. "So he studied conjuring indeed." Always the man who fears a trick spends most time learning its machinery. He nods to Hadley. Put that in your notebook. Not suicide's portrait, but one of anticipation. Next comes a neighbour, a bluff country squire named Mr. Penruddock, who claims to have dined with Sir Alistair at the club a week past. He was queer, sir, queer as winter daylight, railed at a fellow over some papers, though whether legal or antiquarian, I couldn't tell. Shouted about theft and blackmail. Then he laughed it off and bought the fellow brandy. Damned odd. Pressed for the name of this adversary, Penruddock shakes his head. A younger man, dark, neat, might have been one of those clerks or secretaries who swarm round the courts. Hadley listens, but Butler is quicker. He gestures dramatically at Edward Cattermole, who has lurked with arms folded and face pinched. And here stands a younger man, dark enough, clerk enough. Nephew, are you in debt? Did you quarrel with your uncle over papers? Speak up. Edward flushes, then flares. I quarrelled, yes. He withheld my allowance and mocked my prospects. But theft, blackmail, never. He was drunk and fancied insults where none were. Fell's genial chuckle fills the silence. And so the field widens. Quarrels at the club, powders from chemists, servants prowling in corridors. All have motive enough when death comes cloaked as impossibility. Hadley, ever cautious, brings in Miss Hester Vane, the late man's secretary. She is quiet, demure, almost invisible, a figure who ought to escape notice. She admits she copied papers for Sir Alistair concerning certain family bequests. He grew secretive near the end, she murmurs. Locked his desk when he had never done so before. Once he asked me to fetch a deed, then changed his mind and grew angry, as though I had trespassed. She folds her hands. I fear he suspected everyone. Butler eyes her with theatrical solemnity. Below suspicion, eh? And yet how often does the quiet hand turn the wheel? He paces around her like counsel before the jury. You handled his keys, his papers. You knew his hours. You, Miss Vane, could have left the hollow key on his blotter without the wiser. Her voice is low, but steady. If I had wished to kill him, Mr. Butler, I might have chosen a simpler method. It is Fell who interrupts with sudden genial thunder. Not so, my dear. Simplicity is never the road in these affairs. Complexity breeds the fog in which guilt hides. But take heart, we do not accuse. We only widen our view. Hadley collects the threads grimly. Very well. We have a chemist, neighbour, secretary, nephew, nurse and housekeeper. Each with a small cause, each with an opportunity of sorts, but still no means to pierce a locked door. But Fell, sinking again into his chair, murmurs, Ah, Hadley, but we do not yet know whether anyone did pierce it. Perhaps the door was never so secure as it seemed. Or perhaps the trick lies not in entry, but in exit. He chuckles, eyes twinkling. Illusions are built as much on what we believe as on what we see. Before anyone can reply, Briggs reappears, this time with a new object in his hand. Found this, sir, tucked in the scullery drain. He holds up a small rag of cloth, stiffened by some white residue. It crumbles faintly to dust at the edges. Hadley frowns. What's that then? The chemist steps closer, sniffing. Not chalk, nor salt. Something nearer to magnesia, or perhaps... He stops short, colour draining. Yes, it could be oxalate, lethal in wine, if taken in sufficient measure. All eyes turn at once to Fell. He nods heavily, beard quivering. So, a rag to wipe a stopper, a powder to cloud a draught. And found where? In the scullery, the most innocent place of all. Gentlemen, our net widens indeed. The fog outside begins to lift, but the shadow inside grows thicker. For the first time, you feel the house's weight pressing down, as though each new figure drawn into the mystery carries another stone for the wall that hems you in. And as Fell lowers the rag with a sigh, The steady tick-tick behind the panel returns. Louder now, more insistent, like the heartbeat of the house itself. The ticking grows louder, more insistent, until even Butler, who mocks nearly everything, falls silent, straining to hear. Then it ceases abruptly, as though aware of being overheard. In the hush that follows, Fell's cane thuds against the flagstones. "Gentlemen," he rumbles, "whatever trick lies behind this wall, it is part of our illusion, an echo, a breath of machinery, something meant to disorient. But tricks of air and sound cannot kill a man. Remember that." Hadley orders constables to probe the panelling, though it yields nothing but dust. The rag of residue is sealed and sent with the glass to be tested. For a moment, the investigation seems to settle into routine. Yet the house itself resists routine. By afternoon, the fog has thinned to a pale mist, and the world outside Catamol House looks drearily normal. Carts rattling along the lane, sparrows darting in hedges. But inside, you feel the tension coil tighter, as if every corridor waited for the next blow. It comes sooner than anyone expects. Around 4 o'clock, a cry shatters the heavy quiet. You rush with the others toward the sound, the servants' corridor leading to the conservatory. Miss Hester Vane, the secretary, has collapsed by the glass doors, her papers scattered across the tiled floor. She gasps that she saw someone slip through the conservatory, though no door stands open. Before anyone can press her further, Butler stoops, holding up the object she dropped in fright, another key, identical to the hollow one, though solid and ordinary. Hadley takes it grimly. "Where did you get this, Miss Vane?" She shudders. "From the deed box. Sir Alistair kept it with old papers. I meant only to show you he was secretive. But when I turned, I thought I saw a figure by the door. A man, or a shadow. Then it was gone." Butler laughs sharply, though his voice quavers. "A second key. One hollow, one hole. Do you see, Hadley? The neatness collapses again. Our trickster plays with doubles." Fell does not laugh. He kneels with effort, examining the key in Hadley's hand. Note the wear, long used, whereas the hollow one shows little mark of a lock or a hand. The true key and its counterfeit. A conjuring trick in metal. He looks up, his face grave. Someone in this house manufactures illusions. Before they can absorb this, another shout cuts through the hall. Constable Briggs calling from upstairs. The company hurries to the gallery, where Briggs points, trembling, to Sir Alistair's bedroom. The door is ajar, though it had been closed an hour before. Inside, the room looks undisturbed, save for one horrifying addition. On the bedside table rests a glass, half full of wine, with a faint white ring clinging to the bottom. For a moment, everyone stares, frozen. The scene is too familiar, too precise, a grotesque echo of the study below. Butler whispers, "Good God, the trick repeats itself." Hadley strides forward, checking the windows and door. Locked, fastened, and yet someone placed this here while constables patrolled the hall. It's a mockery. A murderer taunts us with repetition. Miss Arden presses a hand to her mouth. "Then none of us are safe." Fell looms in the doorway, his great form filling it like a shadow. "No, my dear. It is not meant to kill again, at least not yet. It is meant to frighten, to hammer into our minds that impossibility reigns here. But impossibility is always the boldest of lies." Hadley growls. "Lies or no, it proves this is no suicide. Someone has the run of the house." Butler cannot resist. And if they can place a poisoned glass in a locked bedroom, then the law must admit. "Silence." Fell cuts him off, voice suddenly sharp. "We deal with a showman, Butler, a conjurer who repeats a trick to prove mastery. But repetition also betrays him, for no conjurer can resist leaving behind the mechanism if you look closely enough." His gaze roves over the room, pausing on the lampstand, the heavy curtains, and the bellrope that dangles innocently by the bed. The constables swear they saw no one enter. Doors were watched, windows checked. Yet here sits the duplicate glass, daring them to explain. Hadley rubs his temple. So we admit it. The locked room trick is not singular. It can be performed again at will. And that means our murderer is still inside these walls. The weight of that thought settles like a stone. Everyone glances at one another. The nephew with his sulky defiance, the housekeeper wringing her hands, the pale nurse stiff as glass, the secretary still trembling, and the chemist silent in the corner. Each looks as likely to be the victim as the culprit. Then Butler bursts out laughing, a little too loudly. By heaven, Hadley, we're mice in a conjurer's cage. But remember this, the cleverest trick collapses when the audience refuses to believe it, and I, for one, refuse. He strides to the table, seizes the new glass, and holds it aloft. See? A phantom drink no more. I wager this contains nothing more deadly than water. Don't! Miss Arden cries. Butler sniffs, hesitates, then places the glass back without tasting. Very well. I concede my nerve is not as keen as I boasted. But the law will require proof, not phantoms. And proof begins with breaking the trick. Fell lowers himself heavily onto the bed, Cane resting across his knees. His jovial mask is gone, replaced by something colder. Yes, Butler. And the trick will break. But remember, when stage machinery creaks, it is near collapse. And when it collapses, it crushes those standing closest. As if to punctuate his words, the irregular tick-tick resumes behind the panelling, louder now, echoing through the beams, until it sounds less like a clock and more like a heartbeat in the dark. The sound swells suddenly, then stops altogether, leaving only a dreadful silence, as though the house itself has paused, waiting for its next victim. You listen to the silence after the house's heartbeat stops, a stage waiting for the curtain. Fell asks for a lamp and privacy. You, Butler, and Hadley sit with him in the little morning room, drizzling on the panes. He opens a battered notebook, taps the margin with a blunt pencil and talks as he writes. Poisons, stage magic, exchange tricks, and the little shames people hide, he murmurs. Miracles are housekeeping with timing. Men die more often of pride than daggers. Butler drums a tattoo. Define the trick, Doctor. An illusion of access, Fell replies. A death that says, no one touched me, and a house that promises, no one came in. Therefore, the murderer must be a ghost or a victim. Since I've no quarrel with ghosts, I'm left with... He lets it hang and writes. Access equals AIR plus string plus habit. Hadley leans in. Air. The candle leaned toward the wainscot, the tick in the panelling, the bell rope that swayed alone, Fell says. Air moves when volumes change. Bells move when something in their run is tugged by weight, by heat, or by cunning. Despair does not advertise with theatricals. Design does, and the hollow key. Butler presses. Exchange, Fell says. Conjurers live by exchanges. The billet switched, the decanter swapped for its twin. We have two keys, one worn, one unworn, one whole, one hollow. A stopper that doesn't belong, wiped with a rag from the scullery drain, a glass that migrated to the wrong side of the blotter. Exchange prettified for murder. Hadley stays careful. Name a person, not a principle. Names come when habits betray them. Fell writes, habit equals hand, divided by side, divided by word. Miss Arden keeps the glass and handkerchief to the right. Later the glass sits left. Someone left-handed, or someone aping it. Mrs. Greeley lies to spare prowling. Edward smokes in corridors. Miss Vane knows every defect of the house and moves like a shadow. The chemist notices too much. Small shames tug threads. Pull the right one. But method, Butler says. A man dies in a room locked from within. I'll write the class method. Fell scrawls, apparent lock, real seal elsewhere, and underlines it. A door may be honest, yet lie. A room may be sealed, and yet ventilate guilt. Think of bell wires and chases, of weights doing a missing hand's labour, of exchanges that plant the story we are meant to read. Hadley exhales. Fog, I want proof under my thumb. Then we make some, Fell rumbles, closing the book. Tonight, when the light goes, we play the conjurer's game in reverse. Lamps, door, bell, curtains, decanter, exact. We let the house breathe as it breathed and invite our company to watch while we nudge the wires they say aren't there. Butler claps softly. A midnight demonstration. Our culprit won't resist an audience. Guilt twitches when touched in its private machinery, Fell says. They reconnoitre the study. Fell kneels just inside the door, dabs a finger along the skirting below the lock. Graphite, he says, a faint smear where none should be. Like a pencil rubbed and wiped, Butler notes. Or thread dressed to glide, Fell murmurs. Who here thinks of such neatness? A chemist, a conjurer, or... His eyes slide to the bellrope. Someone who ties parcels in straight bows and keeps drawers in order. Miss Hester Vane appears with a sheet. If you mean to demonstrate, she says, you may want my house list. Windows that stick, lamps that smoke, bells that run true. Fell reads, pleased. You've saved us minutes, that matter. He tucks it into the notebook. When Sir Alistair wrote, The Hollow That Kills, did he explain it? Number He spoke more of shame, men who despise what they fear. Polite lies protect pride, not murder, Fell says. The killer counts on that courtesy. Hadley posts a constable and orders the gallery watched. As evening reaches for the windows, corridors shrink into lamplight. Every movement looks like a cue. Fell recaps quietly. 3 props. 1, swapping caps and glasses. 2, a contrivance that moves air and wire. 3, a conscience that cannot bear exposure. At midnight, Butler grins. You'll name the conscience. At midnight, Fell agrees. They disperse. You remain as Fell studies the door. The key is just from the inside lock. A decent warded lock, he muses, turned by a steady hand. He points to a tiny crescent low on the brass. Not a finger scratch, a bite, something caught and slipped. He writes, bite mark equals tool, ring, and shuts the book. Enough, or I'll say too much. A constable arrives with Miss Arden. Mind the study wick, she says. It flares when high. Sir Alistair scorched a curtain once. Thank you, Fell replies. And your half dose last night? Measured at the table. Yes. He disliked the medicine's smell. Then you uncorked the decanter there, Fell says. Wiped the spoon on his handkerchief to the right. Yes. Our small procedures hold, he murmurs, which means the latter inconsistency was meant. She withdraws. Fell lifts the bellrope with 2 fingers. Note the tassel, a rubbed shine on one quadrant. A loop was there, once, Hadley returns. Men at all doors, no one in or out without a note. Then our conjurer will fidget, Fell says. Rehearsed tricks itch to be performed. He touches the envelope where Hadley earlier secured the hollow key. We'll want that, he says. Nothing persuades like showing powder travel where we think it cannot. Under custody, Hadley warns, tucking it into his breast pocket. Evidence stays with me. As you please, Fell says. Dusk settles. The house lowers its voice. Anticipation tightens like a wire. Butler prowls, rehearsing the moment he hopes the murderer will blunder. Hadley checks watches with his men. Fell sits enormous and still, as if letting the building settle onto his senses. A clatter of boots. Briggs blunders in, white-faced. Sir, Superintendent, Hadley is up. What now? Briggs swallows. Beg pardon, but the evidence… The key… Fell's head tilts. The envelope in your pocket, sir, Briggs stammers to Hadley. It's empty. The room seems to tip, as if the house had drawn breath again. The room holds its breath as Hadley thumbs the slit envelope and finds only air. Who did this? He says flatly. Whoever cannot abide a demonstration with the right prop present, Butler replies, a touch too quick. Neat as a switch in a music hall. Evidence out, doubt in. Fell's cane taps once, loud as a gavel. No matter, the trick we mean to show does not require the hollow key. Exchanges are themselves our subject. He turns to Hadley. Post your men where we said. At midnight, we repeat last night exactly. Light, door, bell, glass. Everyone watches. No one touches. By 11, the house had gone thin and whispered. Constables stand like shadows at the front and scullery doors. Another waits by the conservatory. Miss Arden hovers near the servants' passage, face calm and bloodless. Mrs. Greeley wrings her apron. The chemist Latham peers at everything as if labels might appear. Edward lounges with studied boredom. Miss Hester Vane is quiet and attentive as ink. You note where Fell stations each of them, as though placing pieces on a chessboard whose squares only he can see. Attend, he rumbles. We bar the study from within with its proper key. Mr. Butler will oblige, and we latch the windows. Nobody enters thereafter. He shepherds you all into the corridor. Butler, with a flourish, turns the key on the far side and leaves it jutting inside the lock, head angled like a listening ear. Hadley pockets the solid twin. Fell kneels at the threshold and, with 2 fat fingers, dusts a pale fringe of chalk along the skirting, so light you'd miss it unless warned. He smears the bell tassel with a whisper of lampblack and powders the door's brass plate. A little cosmetics, he says genially. Stage makeup for a stage trick. Butler spreads his arms. And the order of play? Simple, Fell replies. We confined the air as last night, then let the house breathe where it breathed. Mrs. Greeley will open the kitchen door on my word. Briggs will crack the scullery window. The constable at the conservatory will lift its transom 1 finger's width and no more. We shall see if the candle remembers where to lean. Hadley mutters, if you're wrong, we've made fools of ourselves before an audience. If I'm wrong, Fell says placidly, we learn something else. He lowers himself onto a hall chair facing the study door. Now, lamps down. The corridor dulls to a strip of gold on oak. Inside the study, a single candle guttered and flamed on the desk. The room looks blank and stubborn, like a witness who has sworn to say nothing. Time grows heavy. You feel everyone's nerves begin to creak. Kitchen, Fell says softly. A door thuds somewhere in the depths. The candle's flame trembles, then steadies again. Scullery. A faint draught strokes your ankles. The flame bends a hair toward the wainscot and holds there, as if sniffing. Conservatory. There is the smallest sash clink. The candle leans decisively toward the wall, exactly as it did before, its flame drawn like iron to a magnet. Good, Fell murmurs. Air obeys, plumbing as water does. Butler's voice drops, suddenly hoarse. And the bell. Patience, Fell says. A breath must find its path. He peers at the rope through the open doorway. We have made the house as it was. If some hidden chase couples these rooms, you will see. The bell rope stirs. No one moves, but the cord gives a small, shy twitch. Then again, a stronger sway, the tassel whispering against the wainscot. Lampblack, invisible in the gloom, will be kissing whatever touches it. Hadley releases air between his teeth. That's no ghost. It is designed, Fell says. Now, no one steps forward. His gaze, suddenly sharp, travels not to the rope, but to the faces. Miss Vane has not moved, but her eyes, for the briefest instant, cut to the right-hand skirting where Fell brushed chalk. The look is automatic, unguarded, as if she knew exactly where a thing might appear. She checks herself so quickly you might doubt you saw it. Butler sees it. Miss Vane, do not speak, Fell says without looking round. Watch. He raises one pudgy hand. Close the conservatory. The distant sash settles. The rope slows and subsides. The flame-deprived climbs upright again. The house exhales. Now, Fell goes on, brisk now. Mark what the breath of this building carries. He points at the chalk fringe. The white dust, which he had laid so lightly, is disrupted in a fine furrow for an inch along the skirting, as if something hair-thin had kissed it and gone. A thread, Butler breathes. Run under a door. Or besides, Fell says, where skirting boards make kind little tunnels for mice and mischief. He swings his cane and taps the wainscot at shin height. Tap, tap, until the third tap finds a hollower note. There! Hadley steps as if to kneel. Not yet, Fell cautions. Let our conjurer feel pinched. He lifts his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, will you kindly show your hands? They do. Some with impatience, some with fright. Mrs. Greeley's fingers are greyed with flour. The chemist's are clean. Edward's are stained with nicotine. Miss Arden's are delicate and pale, and Miss Vane's are neat and ink-flecked, save for a faint ghost finger line of black along the inside of her left thumb, as if she had once, and only once, pinched a sooty tassel where it was not meant to be touched. She clasps her hands too quickly, hiding it. Her composure returns as if nailed in place. Butler's smile shows teeth. Ah. Hadley's voice is mild. Ink. Lampblack, Fell says. The tassels kiss. But do not suppose that proof. Others could have brushed it. We will want timing, not smudges. He turns his massive head toward the study. For timing, one more thing. He raises his cane and very gently hooks the lower edge of the door, not touching the brass, only the oak board. No man inside. No hand to turn a key, and yet, watch the keys. Head, he nods to Butler. Count 3. Butler's voice tries for bravado and nearly makes it. 1, 2, 3. Fell gives the smallest upward lift with the cane and lets it fall. Nothing happens. Then a tiny metallic tick inside the lock answers. The key's head, giving the slightest after shiver, like a coin settling after a spin. Hadley stiffens. What was that? A bite, Fell says softly. Something that remembered being there. Something that once caught the key and turned it at a distance. His eyes, for a heartbeat, blaze. Gentlemen, you have seen now that this house can be made to ring its bell and bend its flame without a living soul in the room. The impossibility is only persuasion. And the missing evidence? Hadley says. Ah, Fell replies, almost jovial again. Exchange, my dear. Exchanges have a way of unmasking themselves when you reverse them. As if cued, there is the faintest metallic clink from within the study, somewhere low to the floor, as if a small object had finished a journey and met a skirting board it could not pass. Everyone jumps. Hadley swears under his breath. Open it, he snaps. Not you, Fell says quickly. Briggs. Key, if you please. Slow. We are at the hinge of our play. Briggs unlocks. The door opens to the familiar horror of the room, unchanged, save that on the rug, 2 feet inside the threshold where the chalk furrow ends, lies the hollow key, glimmering like a fish on a dark river stone. Butler laughs once, softly, brought to heel like a truant dog. Returned along the path it took, Fell says. Theft and restoration by the same invisible messenger. Threads are loyal creatures until cut. Miss Vane's composure trembles. no more than the width of a breath. Latham, the chemist, licks his lips. Miss Arden's gaze flicks, not at the key, not at the rope, but toward the lower panel where Fell had tapped, that betraying glance of a mind that knows where the artery runs. You see, Hadley, Fell begins, how a man might die in a room that seems sealed, and how panic might be faked with a bell that answers its master in the scullery. A hiss cuts him off. The study candle, drawn earlier toward the wainscot, has burned low and licked the frayed hem of the curtain. A thin blue tongue of flame runs upward with indecent speed. Someone cries out. Butler lunges, yanking at the bell rope as if it were a fire alarm, which only sets the rope swinging madly and scatters lamp black like soot snow. "Stand off!" Hadley barks. "Water!" "Not water! Smother!" Miss Arden snaps, already tearing the hearthrug free. Fell moves faster than you would think possible for such a large man, hooking the curtain with his cane and wrenching it sideways so the fire starves. Smoke roars against the ceiling and rolls back. Your eyes sting. The house fills with its own breath. When the flame gutters and dies, everyone stands coughing in a grey cloud. In that confusion, one figure, no more than a blur, starts for the servants' passage. "Stop," Fell says, voice like a bell that can be heard through any fog. "If you take one step more, you prove what only the murderer could know." The blur freezes. Smoke thins to a grey veil. The scorched curtain slumps, and the frozen figure at the servants' passage slowly turns back into a person. You watch Fell settle his bulk, the cane across his knees like a magistrate's staff. The house seems to lean in to listen. In a calm voice, Superintendent, Fell rumbles, and with no more theatre than necessary. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will sit in the library." He shepherds them with a patient sweep. Mrs. Greeley, rigid with outrage, the chemist trying not to stare, Edward sullen, Miss Arden composed and pale, and Miss Hester Vane very quiet indeed. Butler closes the door with a barrister's flourish and lounges by the mantel, playing to an invisible gallery. Fell folds his hands. A locked room, a bell that rings without hands, a glass that breeds white sediment, and a key that is not the key. When a story tells you it is impossible, it is selling you something. The currency is an assumption. Butler grins. And the bill of particulars. "First the poison," Fell says, "not the nurse's chloral. Your bottle shows 2 doses in months, the white crust on a foreign stopper, and a rag in the scullery, stiff with oxalate. Sir Alister's word for the taste was chalk and ashes. Oxalate in wine will do that. It leaves a sediment and kills without melodrama, provided one is nudged to drink enough." Miss Arden's voice is steady. "Who nudged him?" Fell nods toward the desk in memory. "A decanter left invitingly. A glass moved after your visit from right to left to suggest clumsiness or panic. And a hollow trinket to carry powder without a bottle clinking." He picks up the recovered toy. "This bauble, which can dust a stopper's lip. The key is not the key. Our poor fellow wrote the truth more literally than he knew. The hollow killed." Latham, the chemist, flushes. "You imply I imply knowledge, not guilt," Fell says kindly. "You told us of smoke powders and harmless tricks. Someone else made them harmful." "But the door," Hadley says, drawing him. "A man alone, bolt shot, key inside." "Ah." Fell's eyes brighten. "The door is the conjurer's cap. Watch the hand beneath. A hair-fine loop, horsehair, silk, even gut, slipped round the bow of the key while the room was still innocent, trailing under the door where skirting leaves a mouse's road. A tug from the corridor turns the key after the victim is dead. The loop is then snatched off with a jerk. It bites the brass. He taps the low crescent scratch and vanishes along the same little tunnel into the bell-chase hollow. You heard the tiny tick when I lifted the door with my cane. That was a memory of strain, left in the gear. Mrs. Greeley bristles. Then anybody with the patience to thread a house, Fell says. Which brings us to our bell that pulls itself. When we opened the kitchen, scullery and conservatory in the right order, the candle leaned toward that wall and the rope stirred. Not a ghost, but a vein or loop fastened to the bell run where it grazes the wainscot. The house's breath does the hand's work. The murderer needed only to crack a transom elsewhere to make foul play in the study. You prove that, Hadley concedes. But who set the threads and veins? Who knew the chases? Who could float a hollow key back under our noses? Someone who lives in lists and lines, Fell says softly. Who offered me, a little too readily, a house list of sticky windows and true running bells? Someone who moves soundlessly, reads other people's secrets for a living, and is always in the room without being seen. Someone who, a moment ago, in honest shock, started for the one passage that leads fastest to the scullery vent, the true nerve of the trick. Miss Hester Vane does not lift her head. If you accuse me, she says, say it plain. Butler's voice goes velvet. With pleasure, Miss Vane, you. Fell raises a blessing hand. Let us be civilized, Butler. Evidence first. Miss Vane, you had the run of Sir Alister's papers and rooms. You found the solid twin key and collapsed at the conservatory, the very quarter whose high transom pulls our hidden vein. Tonight you glanced, before you could help yourself, at the skirting where I dusted chalk, and your left thumb bears a thread's worth of lampblack from a tassel no secretary would ordinarily touch. You gave me a map of where to breathe in this house because you needed to know where you had breathed last night. She looks at her hands. The faint black line on the inside of the thumb is almost gone in the soot of the fire. A smudge, she says. That is a thin rope to hang a woman. Then the thicker rope, Fell answers, gentle and inexorable. Motive. Sir Alister's quarrel at the club, theft and blackmail, was not at Edward or the chemist. It was a young, dark, neat person who haunted the courts and knew transcripts and deeds. He had suspected alterations in bequest drafts. You copied them. You were clever enough to move commas, to transpose a line, to make a later codicil ruin an earlier one. Pious theft dressed as tidying. When he saw it at last and threatened prosecution, oh, you knew how fast shame walks in a small town. You read enough frightened letters to know. Shame is the true poison. The rest is machinery. Her eyes shine suddenly with a furious, held-in life. I mended his stupid sentences, she says. I put sense where there was spite. He hoarded, he sneered, and he raged at charity. He would have cut a widow to sixpence because she dropped her H's. He called, me girl, at 31. Shame? Yes. Mine and his butler, who has prosecuted and defended both saints and sinners, softens despite himself. You built a theatre to kill him. I built a door he could die behind, she says. The bottle would have done its work in any room. The rest, I wished to be kind to myself. If he seemed to choose solitude, perhaps I would have chosen less. Hadley's voice is low, official by habit and human by effort. The bedroom glass? The second shock? She answers without moving. I put it there after lunch while the watch was changing, and I cracked the conservatory a finger width at dusk. Fell nods once. And today, when our poor superintendent kept the hollow key in his breast, you had already slipped a loop to its ring while he leaned to mark a note. When the drought ran and the thread remembered, it came home the way it had gone, like a message through the walls. Miss Arden's calm breaks in a small cry. Hester, why not go? Why not leave and let him rave? Miss Vane's mouth bends, almost a smile. Because he would not rave. He would assemble his little lecture as the doctor has, and point, and I would become a parable of fallen neatness, because he told me so, In the afternoon, he caught the first alteration. He said, "I will make an example." Butler steps forward, voice surprisingly quiet. "I have seen guilt flaunt and grovel. I have rarely seen it sit up and take dictation. Why the bell, Miss Vane? Why the performance?" Her answer is very simple. "Because I was afraid, and because I could." Fell heaves to his feet, sorrowful and implacable. "There is still one thing you cannot do. Keep the last step hidden. Hadley, if you lift the wainscot where I tapped, you will find the vein of thin card pinned to the bell run, the loop that kisses the tassel, and the remnant of silk that bit the brass. And behind the desk panel, folded small, the envelope in which Miss Vane carried her powders to the scullery, wiped with the same oxalate as the rag. I think you will also find, because she is tidy, the tiny sleeve that slipped over the key's bow to take a bite when jerked free." Miss Vane closes her eyes. "Yes," she says, "all of it." Hadley's pen does not scratch. There is nothing to write that will change the weight of the room. He says only, "Miss Hester Vane, I must ask you to come with me." She rises. For an instant, she looks exactly like what she has been all along, the quiet hand that moved the play. She meets Fell's gaze. "You were kinder than he would have been," she says. Fell's voice is very deep. "Kindness does not abolish the dead." He lifts his cane as if it weighed 100 pounds. "Take care on the stairs." Butler watches her go, throat working. "Well," he says at last, forcing a flippancy that does not fit, "I suppose the theatre closes." "Not yet," Fell answers, eyes on the scorched curtain. "There is still the part where we put out the last coal, and the audience goes home wondering whether the ghost bowed or only the dust." The echo of Miss Vane's footsteps fades down the hall until it seems the whole house exhales at once. Constables murmur, their boots rasping on the flagged floor. Hadley follows with a grave, deliberate tread. The door closes on them, leaving only the acrid tang of extinguished fire and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. For the first time in hours, Catamol House is without its secret antagonist, and yet the silence feels no less haunted. Butler flicks open his silver case with unnecessary flourish, lighting a cigarette like a man who must act lest his nerves betray him. "Well, Fell," he says, exhaling a plume toward the scorched curtain. "I've argued 1,000 causes in court, but none quite so grotesque as this. Locked rooms, vanishing keys, invisible wires. My God, it was a stage play in every sense. You've given her the lecture she deserved. Still." His eyes narrow, sharp again. "I wonder whether we were audience or actors." Fell lowers his bulk into the armchair, the wood creaking under the surrender of weight. He does not answer at once, but gazes at the smoke curling from Butler's cigarette, as though it were a diagram of human folly. "Actors, yes," he rumbles finally. "Each of us, strutting in a house of draughts. Some lied to spare pride, some to spare others, and some only to spare themselves. It is always so. A murder is not committed in a vacuum, but in a room crowded with illusions. Pull aside one curtain, and another drops in its place." Butler flings himself across the hearth rug. "And yet it ends as all cases must, with handcuffs, the police van, and another name for the record. Tell me, Fell, do you believe she poisoned him only to protect her little forgeries? That seems a sordid exchange, ink for life." Fell chuckles, though without mirth. "Do you think so little of pride, Butler? A pride nurtured quietly for years, bent over desks, invisible, tidy. One discovery, and all collapses. She is branded a petty thief, her trade ruined, and her name mocked in the club's smoke. Pride is a castle built of paper. A candle is enough to burn it. She struck first, and dressed the blow as an impossibility. It is the way of frightened cleverness." Hadley re-enters then, the set of his shoulders heavier than before. She confessed fully, he says. The devices in the wainscot, the loop for the key, and the vein against the bell rung. We found them, as you said. She explained every step, calm as if she were reading minutes. It will not be a long trial. He glances at Fell. God help us. I almost pitied her. Fell stirs, his voice soft. Do not pity too much, Hadley. She chose theatre, where honesty would have been done. She made a corpse speak words he never meant. She dressed shame as impossibility, and for that she must answer. But pity, a little. Always pity a little. Butler grinds his cigarette under his heel. Bah! The law will not pity, nor should it. We are left only with smoke and explanations. He draws himself up, theatrical once more, as though restoring his armour. Still, I cannot resist a barrister's flourish. I will say this. No trick of wires or powders, no hollow keys or drafts can outwit the eye of Dr. Gideon Fell. You'd have made a devastating witness, my dear fellow. Fell waves a fat hand, amused. And put the jury to sleep within 10 minutes. His chuckle deepens. Better to leave such fireworks to you, butler. I will keep to books and beer, which are mercifully free of drama. The grandfather clock booms the hour, echoing through rafters still stained with smoke. Outside, the fog has lifted, leaving bare branches etched against a pale dawn. Servants creep about the house, quieter now, tidying with the unease of those who clean after a play has closed. The world insists upon resuming its order, though that order sits uneasily upon it. Hadley pockets his notebook. The paperwork will be dreary, but the case will stand. You've given me the wires and weights behind the miracle, and you've reminded me why impossibilities make me despise magicians. He sighs, then allows a flicker of warmth. Thank you, Fell. Fell only inclines his head, puffing contentedly on his pipe at last. A conjurer's trick, Hadley, nothing more. But conjurers will go on, so will pride, so will the polite lie. It is our business to see them. That, I think, is enough for one lifetime. Butler, stretching with cat-like grace, strikes his final note. Then let the curtain fall, the hollow key is turned, the lock sprung, and the play concluded. And if the audience demands an encore, he sweeps an imaginary bow. I, for one, shall be elsewhere, nursing a brandy and rehearsing my next speech. Fell chuckles, smoke wreathing his face, eyes glittering behind the spectacles. You rogue, you thrive on melodrama, while I am content with my ale. Yet, in our way, we are alike, each unwilling to let a trick pass as a miracle. And so, let us have done. The fire pops, a final spark on blackened logs. The house creaks, tired after its night of deceit. Butler gathers his coat with a flourish. Hadley signals the constables to clear. Fell remains for a moment, vast and genial, the very image of comfortable ordinariness. Yet you glimpse, behind his spectacles, the weary knowledge of a man who has once again looked too closely at pride and trickery and found them sufficient to kill. He sighs, lifts his cane, and lumbers toward the door. The air smells faintly of ash and chalk, but the draughts are stilled, and the rope no longer stirs. The hollow key lies dull on the superintendent's desk, harmless now, its theatre ended.